Folks, that was totally my fault. Australian internet. I'm back with series three, and I'm having Italian Moose on. He was just with me for 2 secs, but he'll pop in. I'm sure he'll pop in a second. And Italian Moose is a 3D print designer, and a ring in. Here he is. Apologies, mate. Damn Australian internet sometimes. Sorry.
There we go.
Australian internet, buddy. I'm sorry. Sometimes it just goes crazy. So
It's going halfway around the world. I can't really blame it.
nah, it's all good. Mate, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I originally asked you to be part of and do a bit of a bonus episode, but that was going to be in a few weeks. But someone dropped out of my current series three, and I thought, well, this is a perfect opportunity to get you on. So
Perfect time for
thank
me
you
as
very
well.
much
So
for saying yes.
yeah, thank you.
So, as I always like to, don't wave, I'm waving. As I always want to, as I always want to start these things, mate, I know you because of all your awesome designs in the BFG and Epic community. But tell me, and people who are in the chat, and for the future people watching this back, how did you get in the hobby and then get into sort of the designing? You're a 3D print designer. So how did you get all into it?
Ooh, long story. So originally, my first in with miniatures was model railways because kids and trains. What else are you gonna do? So behind me, I've got a railway that really needs finishing. So that was how I got in. And then one day, my dad came home with the intro set for Lord of the Rings. So it was the little box of Meta Minas Tirith, and I think it was the Gondor and Flames book. And I was like, these look cool. And then it all went downhill from there. So yeah, that was long time ago. And then I didn't do much 3D design work until I about got to uni. And then because I did an engineering degree, I started picking up CAD stuff. So the first thing I did in CAD was a Porsche engine block, well, cylinders and crankshaft and cylinder housings. That was quite fun. And then I started getting 3D printing also during my degree. So we had a project in second year where one option was you make a glider, like a drone glider thing, and that sounded hard work. And the other one was you do a robot, and that also sounded like hard work. And then there was the printer project where you get this, I think it was a Velman K8200, which is garbage. But it was a really good learning platform because there was so much wrong with it that you could fix. So it was threaded rod, so it would squeak, the fan was terrible. It had a metal frame, which was nice. So that was my in. And then I started doing really cool things like that, like printing small spaceships because I'm a nerd, and also parts for the design of the glider team. So one of the best things we did was we printed the wing root for the glider, which was a really, really neat way of getting stuff started. And then in my third year, Facebook's being stupid, it keeps losing my place, I did something very cool. Let's see if I can find the picture.
Oh, sweet.
So yeah, so I got started on printing then, and then it all went downhill in my third year when...
Downhill, all good for the rest of us community members. I mean,
exactly.
Just saying.
To go sideways. So in my third year, if you can see that thing in the middle there with the fire coming out the back of it is a 3D print.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So that was designed in CAD, and then we had a laser sinter printer at the uni. So that managed to print this chunky block of metal. Had a bunch of fuel ducts and stuff designed into it. So the whole thing was one big piece. And that was when I thought 3D printing is cool. That was it just, yeah. And then I was what can I print now? So I got to just finishing my degree, and I started thinking, I quite like Battlefleet Gothic when I was younger. I didn't have money to buy any ships, so I've only got a handful. And they're like hen's teeth now, or they're Chinese recasts. So what can I do here? And yeah, so it started with, first design I ever did was sword class frigate.
Very nice.
Always recommending starting small, and then it just went nuts.
I appreciate that you got props ready for it. I appreciate it.
You can't see the Titanic mess that is my painting table.
So you started with the railway side of things. I've kind of got your dad had it and brought in the Lord of the Rings stuff. But we'll get onto the 3D print stuff because I know that's a huge thing. People know, like, if you mention your name, Italian Moose, everyone's like, oh yeah, the guy that prints all the stuff. And it's like, yeah, it's cool. He does all the, anyways. But, so do you still collect regular miniatures and paint as well?
Well, a little bit. I've got a few bits and bobs. Like I bought some Sisters of Battle recently because I was annoyed at the boob armor and I thought I can do better than this. So I bought that kit and hated it. I missed the old tactical squad kit. That was lovely. So I had a few armies and I was such a massive butterfly that I had everything, but very little of everything. And then when I moved out, I was like, oh no, I'm in a tiny student let. Crap. And so I got into smaller scale stuff. So I've got a bunch of Vanguard 6mm down there. I'm getting War Master going because I like fantasy, like massive Lord of the Rings nerd. So that's sort of what I've got going now.
We'll get on to that, as I'm also a massive Lord of the Rings nerd as well. I didn't know that. I mean, we're all nerds really, so it all falls into it. But yes, so that's Tom there, who also has a massive BFG fleet. There is 100%, mate. You've done wonders for the community, quite frankly. But we'll get on to that. But touching on, like, the reason why I asked you about those models and stuff, so you do 3D print design. I want to get into that in a second, and you print off your own stuff. How do you find, the reason I wanted to understand whether you collected other miniatures was what's your view on the current 3D printing sort of side of things in comparison to the big companies and even the smaller companies making stuff, and is it comparable at the moment? Can anyone really, good model and it's comparable in a way?
It's a really interesting dynamic because you really do pay for convenience now. Like I've learned as I've got older and got less and less spare time that being able to just buy models in is great. Whereas when I had loads of time, printing stuff would be great because I spent ages faffing with the printer. The printer filament one down there is still a work in progress. So it's odd. And because you can cast miniatures still much more cheaply than you can print them. So like once you've got your designs done, you can cast them off really, really quickly. But when you're actually designing like one-offs and stuff, printing is still quite a good way to go. So quite a lot of the time you get the masters done in print. So even with the GW ones, if you look closely on some of the Primaris models, you can see the print lines. So like those are blatantly the pre-print tests that they painted up and stuck on the storefront. Which is really fun. Yeah, it's a tricky one for small companies because so many people can just print off whatever they like, especially with the smaller scale stuff. Is the plate of like 6mm can be most of an army, and that's a couple of hours of printing and then a bit of cleanup. But I've got to say, the Vanguard 6mm stuff is so good. I don't think I could print anything that would stay up to that. So it's you sometimes find that the cast miniatures are just so much better.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, and obviously Vanguard being a favourite of yours and mine, John, who runs the company. He's a good bloke and does BFG and Epic and all that sort of stuff. So a favourite of ours. Yeah. So that's interesting because I'm intrigued to know, you guys you're designing stuff and you're at the forefront of pushing those boundaries of what you can print and what you can design. And I'm just wondering, like, what do you think in how it's going to progress in the next few years moving forward? Do you think we'll get to that point where home people, you won't even be able to tell the difference?
It's tricky. I think you've already hit the stage where it's very, very hard to tell the difference unless you're like sticking into the microscope. So the only reason you can tell for the models on GW, for example, is the fact that they've got these really tiny little like shots of key bits of the model. So that's the only way you can see it. So like at arm's length from the table, there's no way of knowing. I mean, even with a decent filament print, it's really hard to tell. So I think we've already passed the stage where the quality is the same. The tricky bit is to get that quality, you've got to faff around with mildly toxic resin, gloves, all that faff. And like if I had kids or dogs, this would be a lot harder work.
I bet. I'm just intrigued because it's one of those things that it's just always one of the, it's the person who's pushing that sort of the design and everything. It's interesting to get your aspect to it. But on that, so I know you, and I think a lot of people know you because of your BFG designs and your Epic designs as well. So for those Battlefleet Gothic and Epic, the old type Epic Titanicus, Epic 40K models at 6mm. So what you mentioned, doing it on getting into it as part of your uni degree in chemical engineering, all that sort of stuff.
Aero engineering, yeah.
Sorry, yeah. I was talking to people yesterday. That's what it was.
Just to throw you.
That's why. So what prompted the leap to doing BFG and Epic from there?
I've always been a massive Spaceship fan, and like my degree. Well, my mum used to joke that I took aeronautical engineering because it's the first one in the dictionary, and that's not entirely inaccurate. And then I realized, like, oh, I can get a job in designing spaceships. Okay, so yeah, and then I was like, well, designing spaceships for a job is really hard work, so I'll design ones that are just like fun as well, because you don't have to care about where all the wires go and all that stuff. So that's how like
I'll trust you on
the
that.
small ones came on. And
I'll trust as an aeronautical engineer that you do need to know where the wires go. I'm gonna guess that.
yeah, harnessing is hard work.
Yeah, I bet.
Because where I
I bet.
work, the people who build them are like downstairs. So if you screw something up, they all come upstairs and tell you off.
To be fair, the BFG community and the Epic community will probably do the same when you screw up a design, so they'll probably tell you.
Yeah. Fortunately, most of the ones I get printed myself. So generally, I've ironed out most of the bugs, but there are a few that are a bit in terms of how thin the lines end up going. But
So what was the
thank you.
first? What was the first one you designed?
So my first design was the sword, and
Oh,
then the
okay.
first print I ever did was this little chunky beast, which is Imperial Cruiser. You know, the one that everyone does first. Um, and then I did the Grand Cruiser because I had the old metal banana. I gave up trying to get it to stand, so it's like, nope, printing it, I'm done.
As a
Yeah,
man who has several of those, I feel your pain on that one. So,
this is so much lighter and it stays put.
mate, the number of
It's,
broken stands that I've got is just it's not even funny, to be honest. It's quite depressing actually. So,
yes, just like, no, it's not worth it.
oh, painful.
Yeah, and then 6 mil stuff, not done so much of. I think the first thing that was my in for Epic was I did the Epic's Eldar super heavy tanks because someone was like, these are really cool. You can do Eldar designs. No one can do Eldar designs. Can you please do one? I was like, yeah, fine. Then many hours later, I finished it. I haven't actually got around to printing one yet, but I've been politely persuaded to do an Eldar army, so that'll be coming up at some point.
Politely enabled. Although, to be perfectly honest, we're all nerds and all in the community, and we all typically enable each other. So it's not difficult to get. Please do an Eldar army. Okay, it's pretty easy.
Basically.
But
Yeah,
what?
and
So
that's.
so sorry. Go on. Go on.
Oh, no, go on. I was losing track of what I was saying.
I was interested. So you did the stuff with the uni degree, and it transfers across. But I'm just wondering, like, so how much of that skill set transfer is it easy for? How do you politely ask convincingly?
Please.
Yeah.
And gifts of Puss in Boots.
Yeah. How does your skills transfer across, and how easy is it to pick up doing 3D design that you do? So, how long does how long does a typical how long does the process take, shall we say?
I think it's getting a lot easier now that the
Experience,
internet.
obviously.
Well, I mean, just the fact that there's a amount of stuff on YouTube that help you design stuff. So when I was starting, it was SolidWorks, which is like the de facto standard CAD program because it does a bunch of other boring stuff in the background that makes life easier for everyone else. But for actual designing, I much prefer Fusion 360, but it's not so good on the configuration management side of things, which is really dull but really important. So I started in SolidWorks, and that was kind of clunky, but we had some lecturers to get us going. These days, though, I would probably go with starting with Tinkercad, which is it's Autodesk again. I'm not an Autodesk fanboy, I promise. But it's really clever at how it pulls in other people's STL files. So if you pull them in, they start looking more like the faces and circles and cylinders that they actually were originally made out of. Whereas if you look at a STL file deep down, it's just a bunch of triangles and it all looks a bit horrible because it's designed to be really easy to pass around as a final product. Whereas the way CAD programs put things together is a bunch of surfaces and curves and stuff. So the geometry itself is underneath very smooth. So you can scale it up and down and you don't get this horrible triangulation stuff. So that's like a good way of starting out, which makes it a lot quicker because you can just pull blocks in. It's very intuitive rather than trying to get your head around exactly how a sketch works and how to dimension it properly, which is all really important for engineering and sort of carries over. So I could pick it up quite quickly to do more fantastical stuff. But the skills you need to do really, really good spaceship models are much more than you do for satellite models, because that's much more about dimensioning it for manufacture, and the shapes are much more predictable. It's basically just a bunch of boxes and some holes to screw it all together. But it really does push the boundaries. And then I could bring those skills back to my work when I had to do conceptual designs in a hurry. So I think my record is I had to do a probe design in about a week for a bid, which was quite intense. But that went from, crud, you've got to start this within a week, to rendered images of a model at the end of it, which were done more or less from scratch. So that's quite, it sort of flows back and forth, which is really helpful.
Yeah. So if someone wanted to get into this, I mean, they don't have your background in that uni side of things, but if someone was looking to get into it, not me, because I'm awful, pay you and others to do it for me, it's fine. Right? But what would be your tips to if someone wanted to try and do their own, epic models or models in general, not just spaceships? Where would you think you would be good to start?
Find someone else's, rip them apart, play about with them. So, like, again, Tinkercad or Mesh Mixer or whatever, just slice it up into chunks and start plugging away around it, because it starts you thinking about where things go, and especially when you start to print them, how prints go well or badly. So if you've got a design that's like really, really pretty, but a bunch of sticky out stuff, it's an absolute nightmare to print. Whereas if you've got something that's really, really blocky, yes, it's a drug, printing off your own models. And because it's so easy to start designing stuff, especially when you've got all the bits to start from. So I've seen someone done a beautiful pack of bits, which are just like mine and a lot of other people's freighter bits, chopped up and stuck together in different ways, which is a really good way of starting, because it gets you on that path. And then you can kick off with, like, you go from a basic shape to designing things. I think the best one to start on is generally like freighters or frigates, because they're quite quick, and it doesn't matter if you do a ton of freighter designs, because everyone wants lots of freighter designs. Because uniform freighters are really boring. You want lots of variety.
Lots of variety to throw in as transports and/or rogue traders as well. Yep. I mean, it's quite good for that. And I think Tom actually has a huge fleet of traders. I think well, transports maybe. I don't know. I get mixed up with people who have awesome, like, I know he's got a huge fleet, but I'm also with him because I had a 3D printer and I gave it to a mate of mine. I think I saw him pop into the chat. I gave it to him because I'm like, I can't do this. I'll be printing too much. And
you got out in time before you got addicted.
It's a dangerous thing, man. I'm totally with you. And so my wife tolerates it enough. Like, so.
Yeah.
But that's interesting about, like, so ripping stuff. So going to places like Thingiverse to get some free files that you can just play around with is a good starting point. Is what you recommend?
Yeah, because most of the hard work's been done already, so you can get the creative stuff down, so you can start thinking about how a ship goes together, and then you can starting from scratch with designing the hard of it. So, like, chunky bodies are quite a good one to start with as well. And because it's frigates, they're usually in packs, so there's lots of them, and it makes it a lot easier to get away with a slightly wonky model. Whereas if it's like a Gloriana or something, it's going to be the thing that everyone's going to look at on the table. And so it has to be perfect.
That is a good point. That is a good point. Yeah, because you've got that, focal point mini that everyone's going to stare at. So maybe start with something a bit more easy. Before you start throwing cathedral on things, or millions of skulls, maybe start with small transports. Yeah,
and transports don't take very long. I love doing frigates because you can sit down in like an evening or two and get it done, and it's lovely. And then a cruiser's like, it depends what stage you do it to, but it can be a couple of weeks, maybe a month's worth of work, and battleships are just soul crushing. Just go on, and you get partway through and you're like, I'm so sick of this design, but it needs to be done.
Well, I was actually going to ask, how long do these designs sort of typically? I suppose it would take. It depends on what you're designing, but for your ships that you design, like you say, like, it can take a month to do a cruiser. Then.
Yeah, a month of most of your spare time. Well, like, my record is the bunch of artillery guns I released recently. That was 2 hours of sitting down and just getting it done all in one go. I streamed the whole thing. It was great, so I could tell exactly. It was 2 hours to take these models. But those were quite chunky because I was like small scale stuff's hard because you think that you've got to put all the detail to make it look amazing, and then you print it and go, actually, I'm going to breathe near this and it's all going to snap. So like I've got some of the lovely Lord Marshall on Discord's artillery guns, which were great. They're like beautiful models, but I can't get the blighters to print properly. So I sat down and designed some ones that are much, much chunkier, but much, much better behaved. And I know when I stick them down on a base, you'd be able to sort of cover it up with filling and ground and stuff. So you won't actually see all the support stuff underneath. So that's like the quick end of stuff.
So when you're designing, you certainly have to take into consideration when you're doing these designs, the pragmatic printing of it and then actually painting and basing it and everything like that. So it is a lot of trial and error, I assume.
Yeah, yeah. If you get it done, like if you've done it enough time, you can usually eyeball it and get it right first time. But even then, it sometimes goes horribly wrong. Or the ones you do first because you're paying attention turn out better. So my Imperial Cruiser models, this is a resin printed one, they're originally designed to print that way up.
Yep.
And so you'd have the base, like the thrusters would be separate, and you'd have the print bed there because they were filament designs. And then you get support underneath the wings, and then some across the top, but not very much. And then the rest of it would all be unsupported. And so you get this really clean hull without too much faff. But with the Eldar ships, getting supports to work for them is hard work. So that's one of the original filament printed Eldar ships. So the way to get that to work is you slice it in half and you print the top half that way. So you only get support underneath that bit, and that bit. And then the bottom half you print that way up. And so you only get support under the wing bits there. And you can see there's support under there because the finish is a bit manky. But that's also why they've got quite sharp angles on the wings. So normally they'd be a lot more there-ish. But because to get the least supports you can get away with in filament prints, then that's got this really sharp angle. And now over on the resin printing, I can do not quite whatever I like, but it's a lot easier.
Yeah, it depends. I suppose it depends on the printing and what resin or whatever you're using to print it. But it's interesting that where I'm finding it that is when you're actually doing your designs in CAD or whatever software you're using, you need to take into consideration how you're building it in that program to then print it. And it's not even taking into consideration scale and all that sort of stuff as well.
I always get scale wrong, to be fair.
There's a reason why I wrote a whole article on sizes for ships.
It is so helpful. Because I've got 2 original Imperial cruisers, a Dauntless, a Banana Grand Cruiser, an Explorer, 8 Defenders, and a few miscellaneous Eldar escorts, and that's it. So
oh no, he's gone. I hope he comes back.
What?
Oh, there you go. You're back.
Okay. Yeah, so I've got so few original models that all the scaling's off for most of the rest of them. So yeah, your big webpage full of measurements is so helpful.
Yeah, and I probably need to add some more in, to be honest, in better pictures, because but it is what it is. It's fine. I'm glad it's helping people like you who can print them things off and everything. So
yeah, because it just ends up right or rightish, which is more important.
Yeah.
Because
so go on.
Oh, just my Dymo battleship is so wrong. I printed off like one wing of it, and it was about that big, and I was like, "That's too big, way too big."
I'm gonna say, make it into a Gloriana, or throw it into a Space Hulk.
Yeah, basically. At some point, I have enough broken bits to make a Space Hulk.
God, mate, surely that's the benefit of having 3D printing. It's like, I just print off loads of bits, I'm just going to throw it all onto some polystyrene and make a Space Hulk.
Yeah, all the fails, they can be all in the Hulk.
100%, do it. If you don't want them, I'll have them. All good. Send them my way. What's been your favorite design that you've done and so far? Like,
it's a good question. I think it's never the one I've just done, because I hate that with every fibre of my soul because it's taken such a long time. I think the one I'm most proud of is the third version of my Chaos Cruisers now, because they look, like, in my opinion, better than the originals, just because they're just that little bit sleeker. So I've got a manky recast here, but you can see the difference in they're just ever so slightly finer and sleeker and a little bit less goofy. So that's one I'm
My
like
mate
happiest
at the
with.
moment is printing off your versions of them at the moment, and they look good. Actually, you can see them on my page. I had a battle with him, and he printed a few off, and
Mm,
just a trial game, and you can see they're good. They're good, mate. They look good.
yeah, and it was tough doing like the third iteration of those it's because you put quite a lot of yourself into every model you make. It's kind of hard when someone goes, "Yeah, you could improve it by doing this," and you're like, "Yes, I really don't want to, but you are very much right." And it's taking that, yeah, it's trying to shove your ego into a corner for a little bit and taking on advice. It's quite hard work, but it always results in a better miniature.
I'm interested now that you mention it because I'm actually doing these. I've done a lot of these now, and a lot of people come. I was talking to Amy last week about it as well, and about sort of unsolicited advice. And people say, and typically it's on your paint scheme or something like that, or you could have done this painting better, or the light source isn't right, or whatever it may be. So how do you, when someone comes to you and says, "Oh, this 3D design isn't, I don't like it, do it again, do something else," how do you respond with that? How do you deal with that?
I've been very lucky so far in that everyone I've run into has been lovely.
Oh, good. That's
So
good. That's good.
generally, they come across with like quite a humble. This doesn't feel right for such and such a reason, and it's not just do this better. It's this bit doesn't feel quite right, and this bit like could flare out a little bit more, things like that. Um, and usually, it's very very helpful. And every now and then, it's like I totally get where you're coming from, and then I print it and go, actually, it's not so bad. So the Alsa's pattern strike cruiser in CAD, the bridge looks horrible. I looked at it and go, that just looks slightly wrong. And then you print it and go, actually, that kind of works because there's just the way it looks as a miniature doesn't quite look quite the same way as the CAD in the way that's positive, which is a nice difference. Usually you design something in CAD and it looks great, and then you print it off and go, ah, crap, I can't paint this. My hands shake too much.
That's fair. That's fair. No, that's good to know. That's kind of good that you haven't had that experience because I can imagine some people would be like, who
Yeah,
could
I
be
think
like
the
that?
advantage is the Epic and BFG communities are all more or less grown-ups at this point because we got into it a long time ago, and now we're hitting the age of like, we haven't really got room for massive 40k armies. What can we do that's smaller?
They are generally pretty chilled, I have to admit. It's a pretty chilled group of sort of old hammer nerds, I have to admit.
Yeah,
They are pretty benign. There's a few people that get riled up over certain things, but other than that, it's pretty chill, which is good. I think the
at the end of the
epic,
day, we're all just happy that people are playing the games.
yeah, well, yeah, yeah. I think the epic guys and girls can get a little bit more riled up when you're making lists and things like that. And I think the only thing that riles up BFG community is generally like chaos cruisers that are like cruisers. I think that's the only one that really gets.
Well, I'd say that's just emblematic of a lot of other stuff. But yeah, as a general, that's the sort of yeah. But at the end of the day, people are just generally like, oh, you're happy that we're printing BFG ships and playing with them.
Someone else is doing it, fellow nerd. Yay!
I'm not alone. I mean, that was the thing that got me is I just started designing these for fun, and then I saw on Thingiverse that Baxter Ricketts slash MK Hand was doing a bunch of designs. I was like, have you had any trouble with G-dubs at all? And he's like, no, not really. A few people get DMCA'd and that's about it. And I'm like, okay, cool. Shoved a load of models on, and then I went from there.
That is a good segue into that because interestingly, so I actually was on a podcast which by Marnabird last week, and I don't know when it's coming out, but soon I'd say, right? And they actually asked me about where to get models and all that sort of stuff as you typically do for BFG. It was predominantly BFG TAP, and one of the things I mentioned was yourself and 3D print people and that sort of thing. And the question was posed to me is like, what about copyright and trademarks and GW and all that? So I know a lot of your designs are specifically designed so that you don't
Yeah.
fall into that.
Well, it's
But
more that
how
I'm
how do
wonky
you
enough
deal
on the
with it?
designs that I can get away with it. Yeah, it's hard because a DMCA is so easy for GW to do. They just send Thingiverse a link and go, "Yep, this is one of ours. Get it off." And Thingiverse doesn't tell you when they're taking it down either, so you can't counterfile. And if you do counterfile, you've got to be ready for a court case. So basically, you just
Yeah.
have to suck it up because it's so easy for them to do and it's so hard for you to counter that you just have to keep making more models. That's the only way of dealing with it. So I've not had too much trouble with the BFG stuff. I've had a couple which I think they've just Googled the word Eldar, which isn't even technically a trademark term anyway, because it was in Tolkien 70 odd years ago. So I've had a couple of Eldar ones go down. The ones that were like fair enough were the Eldar super heavy epic tanks. I did too good a job because they scaled up to 28 mil really well. And a few people printed them and like, oh yeah, crap. Well, I'll say goodbye to those.
That's probably fair, to be honest.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was like, yeah, that's annoying, but on the bright side, there are some exciting things coming from Vanguard soon, so that problem will go away.
You're willing to cave to that one. You're like, yeah, yeah, fair. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
With the BFG ones, you're like, that's a bit much because you don't make it anymore. You've not made it for a decade, and they're not scans or anything. If you've done it from scratch and releasing it for free, then it's quite hard to fight in a court unless you're blatantly trying to rip off something they're actively producing. So if you're
yeah.
making actual Space Marine minis, then you have a lot more trouble because, fair enough, they're still selling them. But with things like BFG, because it's been out of print for such a long time, and they monumentally missed the boat with the BFG Armada games,
Yeah.
and now we're back to the stage of BFG just going back into the shadows again. So, I mean, I like the shadows. It means I can keep doing what I do.
Good point. I mean, good point. And I'm just intrigued because it's quite funny enough. So my badge, they sent me a thing saying I wasn't allowed to sell it, sell stickers or give stickers away, and I'm like, really, me? Yeah, like, really? So
Yeah,
I just
it's
find it
weird the things people get annoyed
funny.
about.
Yeah, why are you worried about it? Anyway? But I can. But a lot of your designs. So you know, how do you ensure that? And like you say, it's like 10 years. It's been out of print and all that sort of stuff. But do you actively through your design process to go, okay, that's too close to the original. Maybe I should scale it back a bit, or
Depends on the ship, really. Most of the freeware ones don't mind. I go for as close as I can get, or as close as I can get, but looks good to me. So there are some things that I do ditch and do slightly differently. Some of the Eldar escorts are like that because they look a little bit goofy in places.
yeah,
And then for the ones that actually start selling, they have to be significantly different, which is a lot more effort, but that's why I'm selling them because it's more effort. The only ones which I probably should have charged for didn't was the second variant of my Imperial battleships because it looks very little like the original, but it is very much the flying cathedral in space that's sort of the look. And then I know Vanguard are much, much more careful about keeping their designs different. But then they have a lot of other issues going on with just being a miniatures manufacturer. So it's a slightly different dynamic once you reach a certain size. If you're just like this guy in his back room, it's less of an issue. But if you start actually making serious money out of it, then GW will start looking at you very hard, especially because you could be a competitor and they don't like that. So anything they can do to get away with that.
your guns on the Tower Fleet are better than the Forge World
Yep.
originals.
The Forgewood ships, gorgeous. Their guns, terrible. There's just these blocky little turrets with some sticks sticking out. Like, you could have put more effort into that.
Oh, mate, they're so difficult. I just, yeah. I won't even talk about the actual. That's the Forge World ones. The Games Workshop ones, which are made out of metal and essentially just blocks of metal. The design has actually grown on me over the years. I have to admit, but
Yeah.
oh god, like Jesus.
Yeah, I've got to explore in a box somewhere. It's not coming out of that box. It's too much work to get it on the stand, keep it on the stand, keep the whole model intact, and then I've lost a couple of the goofy turrets. So I'm just like, I can't be bothered.
But to be honest, I've got BFG just floating around everywhere here. So I mean, I step on like weapons batteries occasionally, and I'm like, where did that come from? Oh, I must have lost that. Like, anyway. But yeah, they're very fragile, the forgeable ones. So if you're producing like ones that will fit into the tower aesthetic, then yeah, ones that are not as flimsy would be very good.
Yeah, or just cheaper to replicate. That's the other one. Most of the ships I don't care too much. Like I don't bother magnetizing or anything because it's partly because you get like a consistent ship story, and partly because it's just cheaper to print another one.
It's true.
And oh, the tragedy, you have more ships.
That's kind of the way I go about it, to be honest. I'm like, what people ask me is like, oh, why have you got so many Imperial cruisers? Why don't you just magnetize them? And I'm like, I can just get more.
Yeah,
Like,
more.
And now with people like yourselves and Vanguard and there's a few others, Battlefleet Galaxy, I know was in the chat earlier as well. I don't know if Darwin's still here, but because there's more minis now available, it's like, well, I'll just get some of those. They're great. Like, why not? So it's all good. All good. So you mentioned the ships that you're looking to sell, and that's via Soulforge?
No. So I do. Scourge Scenics in the UK has agreed with me to license the like some of the basically almost all of the designs, and then there's a few designs I'm cooking up that I'm trying to work out what to do with them. Because I know Vanguard are desperate for chaos designs, and the set of designs I've got coming up, they're chaos designs, but not quite chaos.
That's an interesting. I like it. Okay. So sorry, I forgot. I always forget Scourge Scenics. I'm like, there's always two beginning with S. I always forget.
I know.
I always forget. Yeah, but so Vanguard looking for having a chat with you. Is this exclusive in this chat?
No, they've been looking for ages. Like, if anyone's got any not quite chaos designs, they'd like go for it. Go ask John. He's very keen on them because he's trying to flesh out his navies a bit more. But there's not enough casters, there's not enough designers, and there's loads of people wanting them. So it's like there's a slight imbalance here.
It's good to know. I'm going to have to keep an eye out for it. And Darwin actually is here, so Tom, ask him when you get the chance about his philosophy on truism. It takes a special person to give away things for free.
It was partly because when I started, they weren't very good, and I was like, yeah, whatever, this is good practice for me. It keeps my skills in check for work, so I'll just go have fun, kids. Which comes with a caveat that it does bug me when people start selling the stuff that I've made without asking or anything. That's just like, oh, are you trying to put me off this? But sometimes it's just the joy of doing it.
Yeah, I have seen I have seen your designs on Thingiverse, and then I have seen people using those designs for sales posts, and you're like, I know that was done by Italian Moose. What? Like, how are you? And the weird thing is, it's just, I find it's very strange that someone would take a free file and then sell it when, it doesn't make sense to me in a way. But so how do you respond? Can you do anything about that? Is that something you can?
It depends. Depends on the site, to be honest. Like, that's where I stick on cults quite a lot, because if someone does put up a model of mine that's for sale. So someone did one recently with slight remixes of my Chaos Cruisers, and then they had the tagline like, "These are the best ones available, and they're fantastic." And I was like, nah. Also, you're selling these for $10 each, and you've done like 5 minutes work on them. Can you please take these down, cults? And cults were like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then some sites like eBay, just no point, especially because some people do them as printing services, which gets a bit wobbly. So like people who send files in to get them printed privately, I'm usually okay with, but the people who sell them on the storefront, I'm like, yeah, probably shouldn't do that. That's a bit rude. But as a rule, I'm happy to see people printing and playing.
Well, honestly, like your name comes up in loads of different places of the stuff that you've given away for free, and Goldbugs, your design's got them into 3D printing. I mean, a lot of the community has a lot to thank you for, quite simply. And yeah, just for giving away free stuff. It's like free stuff for people to print. It's fantastic. And whenever your name pops up, it's like, he does awesome designs. It's great.
And the nice thing is I haven't done them so well that people can't do them better, which is also great. So you've got Soulforge and Battlefleet Galaxy both making really cool models. And it's great because they're like, oh, great, here's a model I don't have to redo. Saves some time.
It's already done. You don't have to do it. You just go.
Exactly. I spent so much time staring at the Imperial Cruiser design going, that could really do with a refresh, but then do I need to?
Because other people are doing well. I suppose that's up to. But with those people that doing those ideas, and you're coming up with new ideas yourself, where do the new ideas come from? And I know you're working on, and you can do a bit of a plug here. You're working in the BFG community. There's a sort of a new book that is being produced. There's a couple. This one in particular has around the Disporax fleet, which is like human fleet, but not the Imperium. And I know you're designing that sort of stuff at the moment. So where do these ideas come from, and how do you flesh them out?
Well, as a rule, if I'll skip back to the Sunjammer, which is this wee beauty.
Mm.
So this is just the one that I happened to keep all the sketches for. So as a rule, if I'm not really sure what it's going to look like, there is a bucket load of sketching that goes on.
That's sweet.
And they look like various forms of goofy and slightly wonky and increasingly less wonky. And then all of a sudden you tend to come up with like a sketch that makes sense.
That's awesome.
And then you can sort of design off that. And then also it managed to segue into the Eldar Grand Cruiser design, which looks more
Yeah,
like that.
I haven't got an Eldar Grand Cruiser, so
Well, that's a freely available one, which is nice. So yeah, generally, if I've got like a really clear picture of what I want, then it can just flow straight out of my head. If not, then it takes quite a lot of sketching to get it right. So the new diasporic ships were, I knew they needed to exist and look vaguely chaosy, but not quite. And then I had Delnick on the BFG Discord just screaming domes at me every time I talked to him about it, because he really likes the old, like the same sort of sci-fi aesthetic as the old Spacefleet games, so that very pulpy sci-fi look. And then the back of them basically came to me all at once. This is very, very pre-print. The print went horribly wrong, but that back shape just popped out of my head. I was like, fantastic, I've got the back. What does the rest look like? So I did some like really rough sketches just to get the shape down, and then eventually it came out vaguely as that sort of shape, which people may have seen here, there, everywhere. And yeah, from the side. So it's that sort of, I really like flowing lines in designs, so that sort of came out in the silhouette, which is why I really, really like doing the Eldar ships. So for the Worm battleship, that was this mashed up piece of art with classified stamped over the top of it in the old rulebook, which was Excalibur going, this ship should look vaguely like this, but I don't really do design, so it's going to look like this. We're going to stick a classified over the top of it, so everyone looks interested but doesn't really know what it looks like. And then he was like, it needs to look vaguely like a battleship, but using the Craftworld Eldar set of shapes. So your Craftworld Eldar ships look more or less like that, give or take. Then they have all these sort of, the way the curves fit together, which like you compare it to a Corsair ship, which has a slightly different outline. And then to make a Craftworld Elder ship bigger, you've got the outriggers that went on the Flame of Asuran. So you can take all those bits, like mash them in one ear, and eventually it comes out the other ear looking vaguely like that, which you may recognise from the XR rulebook.
Yep, very much so.
So it looks like a rather beastly dragon ship with some extra guns tacked on.
That's much, much bigger than I've got a Flame of Asuran, and that's so much bigger because the standard, the original Games Workshop one is probably about the same size as a normal sort of dragon ship.
Yeah.
Wraith ship, about the same size, only a little bit wider because of the sails. So yeah, that's monstrous in comparison.
Yeah. I mean, it's a monstrous ship with any rule set you look at. It's like, oh great, you can shoot how far, and it moves like an Eldar ship.
Yep, terrifying.
Very intimidating.
Yeah, they're terrifying ships, quite frankly. I've actually never lost a game with my Craftworld Eldar fleet. No.
What I hear there is a brag, and someone needs to take him down a notch.
I quite happily let someone beat me. God, this is ridiculous. It's not on. I'm not even very good at BFG. Like everyone said, like, oh, it's not BFG. Like, I'm not even very good at it. Like, so.
You just like the spaceships, yeah, totally.
But spaceships. Not very good at the rules, but I'm playing it. But yeah, it's all good. It's all good. So that particular design, I know you mentioned earlier that we talked about the length of time that it takes to do it. I know that one's been kind of going back and forth, the drawing board and everything, but how long does that sort of fresh design take to design and print off like that?
I think I started thinking about it 6 months ago. I started doing it 3 or 4 months ago, and now the fleet as a whole is more or less done pending design updates. So that's sort of the timescale we're talking. And then if I wanted to get them like cast properly, that'd be another 6 to 8 months down the line, because at the moment there's no casters with any spare time. So it's that sort of time scale for a small miniature. But the new diasporic ships are like about as detailed as I can get. So that's the sort of upper bound of how long it takes to do something from scratch is, yeah, many months. And it was pretty solid work as well. Like I watched my Steam playtime just drop to nothing for several months, which is quite depressing.
That's not what you want, mate. That's not what you want. That's not. So, and so that fleet, I'm asking this purely for my own benefit. Will that fleet be available on Scourge Phoenix one day?
I'm trying to work out who is best to do it. I know there'll be paid files as well, so there'll be paid files on cults, especially because shipping to Australia is stupid. Because apparently living the other side of the world means it's not twice as much; it's like 4 or 8 times as much to buy anything in Australia. So yeah, I'm trying to have pity on the poor Australians.
Because I'm just going to put it out there. It's a guarantee. The moment you release all this stuff, it's like, well, that's a new fleet.
Can I apologise to your wife in advance?
You. My wife well and truly knows that when it comes to little ships, it's just never going to stop. The other stuff, I might stop like in my Imperial Guard and all that on my Space Marines, but when it comes to little ships, it'll never stop. So.
Yeah, probably. There's always more to do. And once you've redone your fleet, I need another one just because this one isn't quite right, and I don't really want to strip them either.
Well, there's always room for another. There's always room for another fleet floating around somewhere. I mean, why not have? I mean, especially when like yourself, Phoenix, Soulforge, Battlefleet Galaxy, Vanguard are all producing such cool shit. You're just like, well, now I need to get it.
Yeah, I want a fleet of those, a fleet of those, a fleet of those, and a fleet of those, and a new mortgage.
New house. I need a new house for a new like a new garage to store all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's all good. It's fine. It's fine. But that actually gets me on with the timing side of things and progressing through and all that. Because we actually briefly mentioned this on your Twitch stream when you were doing your design, and you're talking about perfectionism.
Mm.
And you struggle with that. And a lot of us do. I don't, I'm useless, but a lot of people I know I have spoken to during these chats also have problems with it. So how do you deal with that when you're trying to design it to a deadline? How do you sort of reconcile that?
I'm very lucky that I never have to do deadlines, which is great. So like all the commission work I've done, it's just been like work on it till it's done, and we'll work on it from there. I generally find getting a community involved as soon as possible is quite helpful, because then they've seen it looking bad. So like as for your mates, they see you on a bad day, they know to appreciate you when you're having a good day. It's like as well I get on trouble with my girlfriend is that I've seen her at her absolute lowest, and we know exactly what we both look like at that stage. So like there isn't that idea of trying to look perfect, which is the same for ship design. If you have a really, really crappy, lousy day and you're like, this design isn't working, and you can post it up and people will go, yeah, try this, this, and this. Also, one of the most useful things I ever had was someone, like, if you ever met Horizon, who lives on the Spec-On forums and now on Discord. He's a lovely guy. He's usually very, very effusive with praise, and then every now and then he'll go, you can do this bit better, and that's the most helpful thing I've ever had, is someone who's usually like, will tell you when you're doing it well, but you trust them enough to tell you nicely when you're doing it not so well, and that really helps. Otherwise, you just keep on working on it until you're sick to the teeth of the design, and then usually you release it, and then you forget about it forever. Basically, it's very intimidating releasing something, because you just put it out there and you've got no idea how anyone's going to react if they've not seen it before, and it might be like, oh, it's brilliant, or oh, it sucks, take it away from me.
Yeah, I suppose if it's a labour of love and it's taking you that long, like it's taking months to do a battleship or something like that, you don't really want to put it out there, and you're trying to make it perfect, because nothing ever is perfect.
Exactly.
And then it's not wanted, or not, like someone doesn't, and you don't know that reaction. So working with the community, I'm sure, I know you do that. I know you do that, but yeah,
and every time I've done that, it gives a much better result as well. Like with the Chaos Cruisers, a great example. The Eldar Super Heavy Tanks were another great example. You just generally, if you can hold yourself together enough to ask for help, it really helps, and it helps you ask for help the next time as well if you have a good experience with it. And if you don't, you have to like do a load of back reflection and all that stuff the therapist talks to you about.
Self-reflection on the moment, that's not what you want to do, is it? It's like...
Well, if you can manage it, self-reflection is fine. If you're thinking things through and you're like talking down all the nasty little voices in the back of your head, because yeah, it's tough, especially with the ones where you put real heart and soul into it. So like the Imperial battleships were like I'm going to turn this up to 11 and see what happens. And that was just gargantuan amount of time and effort. And like when towards the end when I was working on it, I couldn't even have my browser open at the same time as Fusion because the file was so big. So it was like load up Fusion, kill the browser, open the file up, see how it goes. The really tough one for me was the Eldar Sunjammer, because this was the one I designed as my mum was more or less dying, and I really wanted her to see it before she passed. So that was like, there is so much heart in that model.
Yeah, that's
like,
brutal.
Grief and everything, which is, I think I found it quite therapeutic because I've got it there and it's something I can remember about. And like, you can see all the bits where you sort of, like, you can tell what sort of day you're having with the stuff you design or the way you look at the world. So there's a tree near where I live where I go run past. And if I'm having like a really stressful, bad day, I can look at this tree and go, there is something in that tree trying to scream and get out. So it looks like this really deformed thing with claws and everything. And then I walked past it recently when I was having a really chill day, looked at it and gone, it's a tree. And it's like, you can really see the different ways you look at the world and the different ways bits of that comes out in how you work. But it's at the same time quite therapeutic because you can push it into that design and then get it out of you. So instead of screaming to a pillow or smashing things, you can just, make something.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy how that, like, mental health in the hobby is absolutely huge. I mean, I think a lot of people in the community, I mean, you have different facets of the hobby: painting, collecting, designing, like yourself. You have cosplay, you have kit bashing, all that, writing, rules, all the stuff that you do for it, that people do, and it's all about the hobby and the community. And it, especially over the past year, it's helped a lot of people for obvious reasons. So it's, and that's actually a really lovely story that you have that model to, not the right word to say remember your mum for, you know what I mean, but it's
sort of commemorative type thing, yeah.
Yeah, 100%, yeah. It's a good gesture that you have there, and it's something that you can look at, and it'll make you feel good. I mean, at the same time, it's like that was produced with heart and soul.
Yeah, and because it's out there in the world, like it's a free download on Cult at the moment, that it's spread all over the place. It's going to live for a lot longer, which is quite a nice thing to think about.
I think I'm going to have to get one. I know that story. I'm going to get one. I'm going to have to find one and get one and print one off and paint it. I'm going to have to do that. It's going to happen.
Yeah, my best advice though is print it slightly bigger than it's designed, because the front frills don't come out very well at design scale. I went a bit too skinny and too detailed. But yeah, and like, it's the nice thing about this hobby is that some of it you can be quite insular and just like tuck yourself in a blanket and do the things that make you feel better. And then you can find it as a sort of outlet for the things you struggle with. So like with the anxiety, the depression, also, it's a way you can talk about it, but not in certain ways, or just get another identity on top of that. Which is quite fun, having like an online identity, is it's different from your real life one, and being able to keep those two separate can be quite helpful.
Agreed. Yeah. Sometimes it merges. I mean, it is what it is, but I mean, this is kind of what you get. I mean, I think some of the Australian lads that are in here, I mean, they'll tell you this is how I am all of the time. But poor buggers. But I think having that community and the ability for you to, you share your designs, like you're not alone now. Like maybe when you were originally producing it and putting it on Thingiverse out there, but that there's a large community that love your designs and bloody print them all and want more. So yeah,
and it's a community that just loves the system as a whole, so they can all, like, almost all models are appreciated, and almost all printed and painted ones are just, everyone enjoys seeing spaceships, and so they're always happy to see them. It's like basically like a dog when you get in, it's like, it's really pleased to see you all the time.
I'm writing that down. I'm writing that down. Spaceships are like dogs.
Well, the spaceship community is like a bunch of dogs in the nicest, most polite way, in that they're always pleased to see spaceships.
I'm writing that down. I got told, so in that particular podcast that I did the other day, so Lily, who was one of the presenters for it, she was like, you got your ships, they're like your little love babies. First time I've ever heard anyone say that, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, there's something you put time and effort into, and it's quite sweet. And then, like, usually if sometimes I listen to music, sometimes I listen to like audiobooks and stuff. So like I can usually sometimes remember what I was listening to if I look into a certain part of a model. So like the Imperial Battleship, I can remember that was Herodotus' History of the Persian Wars. Um, the diasporic ships were Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, which is terrible but worth listening to. Some of the new Ragnarok heavy tanks and the Alsace pattern were Mary Beard's SPQR. You're noticing a distinct history theme here.
I am here, yeah.
Yeah.
Not bad,
So you can sort of just remember bits and bobs as you go along, and it's quite nice because it's a part of your life as a physical thing.
very true. And I mean, like, before I lose track of something in my brain, there's a really good YouTube channel called History March that does loads of battle history, like talks about the commanders and stuff. You might be interested. I don't know. You can just
Still should. I'm running out of stuff at the moment. You may notice a slight obsession with like military stuff knocking around, even though I don't actually like English Civil War reenactments. I fence. I've got a T-shirt with loads of swords on. I do all that, but then I distinctly dislike wars as a whole. In reality, I just studying them is interesting and how they come about.
Agreed. I'm totally with you on that one. Totally with you on that one. Mate, on that note, we've got like a minute or two left of this. I want to say thank you very much for joining me. I asked you a couple of weeks ago to join me, and you jumped at it and said thank you. And so I really appreciate you you coming on. It's been great chatting with you. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I have.
And for everyone who's watched this and watching back and everything like that, so Italian Moose has a Twitch channel which he shows his designs and how he
very irregularly, but yes.
Still do though. And you can find all his free designs on Thingiverse. Just type in Italian Moose and you'll find him.
Pretty much, yeah.
You're showing your labour of loves, your more detailed models with Scourge Scenics in the UK.
On Cults 3D as well. 3D as well.
On where, sorry?
So there's paid files on Cults 3D and then prints on Scourge Scenics as a general rule.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's other odds and sods knocking around.
If you want little ships, this is your man. If you want to get some printed stuff.
Yeah.
I think I speak for the whole BF. I'm going to speak for the whole BFG community here. Thank you very much for doing what you do, and you're certainly one of the people that has helped bring more people into the BFG community, quite frankly, by providing access to out-of-production ships, quite simply. So it's all I can say is thank you.
Oh, thanks. It's really, really awesome, and it's great that it's such a nice, growing community as well.
Pleasure, mate. Thank you, everyone in the chat and who joined and watched. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much, Italian Moose, mate. Absolute pleasure, buddy.
Cheers to it.
See you, everyone.